In the last section, we walked through the process of adding subdocuments to an existing record. In this section, we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to create a record that already has a post embedded inside of it, and then we'll figure out how to remove that post. It's going to look in practice quite similar, at least for the testing setup, to the saving or adding a post to an existing user, but there is one big major difference this time around, and so I do want to go through the process. We will get through it pretty quickly though, because a lot of the test setup is going to look pretty gosh darn similar. So let's go ahead and get started. Beneath our existing it statement, I'll add in a new one, and we'll give this one a description of it can remove an existing subdocument. Then we will add in our function with a done callback. So this time around, we want to create a user that has an existing post. We'll save it, we'll fetch it out of the database, we'll remove that subdocument, save it again, pull the user out again, and make an assertion about it. So in practice, nearly identical to what we've got up here, but the big difference will be that this push, instead of pushing on a new record, we want to subtract or remove a record out. All right, so let's get started. We'll start up our Joe model. So new user, give him a name of Joe. And for our list or embedded collection of posts, we'll start them off with one post that has a title of new title. Now we can save Joe to Mongo. So we'll say joe.save. And this is where a lot of the code inside of here is going to start looking pretty darn similar to what we have up here. So we'll save Joe. We will then fetch him out. Name of Joe. Then we'll add in another callback that will get called with the user that we just pulled out. So now inside of here, this is where we're going to want to remove that embedded document. Now, when we added an embedded document, we used some very classic JavaScript function in here, array.push, to add in this new record. So you might be thinking, okay, well, there's got to be, we can use slice or splice to pull a record out of an existing array. Well, we definitely can, but Mongoose recognizes that the use of splice is kind of a pain in the rear. Let's imagine for a second that we had a bunch of different records inside of this post collection or this post subdocument collection. We would have to kind of like walk through that list and find a very particular record that we wanted to pull out. And then, it's such a pain in the rear. I don't know if you've ever done this with JavaScript, but you got to find the index of the record that you want to remove and then call array.splice with that index, pull it out, blah, 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 all that kind of painful stuff. Long story short, it's kind of a pain using raw JavaScript to remove elements out of an array. So Mongoose recognizes that that's a pain, and it gives us a little bit of an alternative API for removing a record out of a nested collection of records. So this alternative API, all we have to do is look at our list of posts. We will directly access the post that we want to remove, and then we'll call remove on it. That's it. So just to be really clear, I'm going to rewrite this statement right here in a different fashion, just to make sure that it's really clear what's going on. I'm going to say const post is user.post at 0. So this is my singular post, the one with new title of new title, and I want to remove it. So I'll say post.remove, like so. So I'm calling remove on the post itself, not like actually on the user or anything like that. So this is a little bit of magic that's injected by Mongoose. You'll notice that again, we're not looking at the array of posts and splicing out or filtering out a record. Now, just like adding a subdocument where we modified the list of posts and then we had to save the overall user, the exact same thing is true here as well. So just calling remove right here, that does not actually save the record for us automatically, which is distinctly different from a lot of other code that we've seen. For example, so we'll say don't write this. Just to be clear, don't add this code in. We've seen previously that we can remove a record out of a Mongoose collection by saying like, user.remove, or more particularly, joe.remove. When we called this, it made an actual request or operation on the database. When we remove a subdocument, however, the same is not true. It does not automatically save our record off to Mongoose, or off to Mongo. It just removes it out of the subdocument collection of posts, and the user is still kind of dangling there and sitting just kind of like sitting there and be like, all right, well, my list of posts changed, but I guess I don't really have to do anything about that. So after we remove a subdocument out of a nested collection like this, we still have to manually call save on the parent record, which is the user for us. So we're still going to say return user.save. In practice, this ends up giving it a somewhat similar API to the process we use to add a subdocument. Remember up here, we had said, okay, push on this new record, and then we explicitly said user.save. Now in this case up here, it wasn't really a stretch of the imagination to understand that, okay, yeah, we got to call user.save. In this case down here with remove, yeah, it's a little bit more of a pain to have to remember that we have to save the user, just because, again, we saw stuff earlier like joe.remove, and that made an actual operation on the database. Okay, so in theory, this will remove the post. Let's now fetch the user, fetch Joe out of our database, and make an assertion about them. So I'll add on another .then, and inside of here, we'll do another find one to find Joe, and then we'll add on our last .then with the user, and inside of here, I want to assert that my list of posts is now empty. So I'll say user.posts.length is equal to 0, and then I'll call my done callback. One thing that I want to mention about these big promise chains, a very common typo to make is if you put on a semicolon like right there, and then you don't like quite recognize it. Do make sure that whenever you're chaining on all these .thens, that you've only got a semicolon on the very last then. Because essentially what you're saying when you put on the semicolon right here is this is one statement right here, and then you're left with kind of like this dangling statement that is definitely going to throw an error whenever your Node.js or Mocha tries to run this code. So do watch those semicolons. Okay, so I think that we're ready to give this a shot, run our tests. So I'm going to save it, flip over to my terminal, and okay, fantastic. 19 tests, passing as usual. We will change the assertion in here to make it break. And yep, looks good. So I'm going to change it back to 0, and we are left with some very nice running tests. Okay, so at this point in time, we have seen how we add subdocuments, how we remove subdocuments. So I think maybe now would be a good time to talk a little bit more about some other stuff that's going on with subdocuments. Let's take a quick break and then continue in the next section.